Welcome back to Tied Up with the Morgans. Today we are talking about this tree right here behind me. This is a staple in the eastern United States. It's known for its valuable nuts and very distinct bark. Today we're talking about Carya ovata, shagbark hickory. Let's get into it. First I want to talk about the names. Carya ovata is the Latin name. I already said that. Carya derives from a Greek word named Carya with a K, and this one's with the C. So the genus is Carya, and that Greek word means walnut. This hickory tree is a part of the walnut family, and the walnut family's Latin name is Juglandaceae, I think is how you pronounce it. So anyways, that's the family it's part of. That's where it gets the genus name. And ovata comes from a Latin word named ovatus, and that means egg-shaped, which is in reference to the nuts off the tree. They're egg-shaped. Some of the common names of this tree: shagbark hickory, scaly bark hickory, upland hickory, shellbark hickory. I think those are the only ones I know of. There's probably a couple more, but those are the ones I know it as. I always knew it as a shagbark hickory growing up. So shagbark hickory is a medium growing tree. It'll grow about 70 to 80 feet tall. The tallest being in Savage Gulf, Tennessee, which is it's over 150 feet tall. I'd love to see that one day. The average diameter at breast height, also known as DBH, is 12 to 24 inches. And this is a big one. You might not be able to tell here on camera. I really should get a measurement on this. It is huge. The biggest DBH on a shagbark hickory is over 48 inches, but look at the canopy on this tree. Isn't it just perfect? It is. This is my favorite tree, I think. Just incredible. And you think of the amount of life this has supported over the years. And we're going to dive into all of that. But I just had to show you this here at the start. This beautiful tree. My favorite shagbark hickory right here next to the goats. So the native range of this tree is pretty big. I would say on the map here, I'll include a picture of it right after this, but pretty much like southeast Nebraska, southeast Minnesota, east of all of those places, down south into parts of even like northeast Texas and northeast Mexico are about as far south as it goes. So it has a big native range. It makes up a lot of the East Coast, and yeah, that's it. Here's the map right here. So shagbark hickory grows best in humid climates, which is what we have. Other than this year, it was a really dry year, but here in Western Pennsylvania, it is a humid climate. And if you looked at that map, you probably thought that that native range covers a lot of different climates, and it does. A few facts about that. The rainfall in that native range varies from 30 inches a year to 80 inches a year. Snowfall, less than 1 inch to over 100 inches. And the temperatures vary a lot. And its growing season, the average at least, varies from 140 days to 260 days. So that tells you it is a hardy hickory tree. with a native range like that can survive in a number of different climates. Same goes for soil. The soil conditions vary a lot. Here in the north, you'll find them more in the uplands, one of the names being an upland hickory. And in the south, you'd find them more in the lowlands. This is one I'm not too familiar with, but I did read about it and thought it was interesting. The whole taxonomy of soil, which I don't know a lot about, but I know this range covers 7 different soil orders and 14 suborders, varying from glacial till, metamorphic rock, sedimentary, a number of different soils. So we can tell that it is a very, I guess, hardy, hardy. It grows in a diverse area, many different climates. So yeah, very cool tree. I like to read historical accounts of like Americans, early Americans, I should say, and read their stories on, what the landscapes looked like really before all the development, before all the farming, before the introduction of non-native species. I love those historical accounts on what things look like. One was from a Spanish explorer, Hernando de Soto. Between 1539 and 1542 in America, he wrote about a lot of the different species he came across here, and one of them being the shagbark hickory. He talked about its bark. He talked about the bark being very distinct, right? Very different, but also the valuable nuts. Some other accounts, like the Powhatan Indians, probably saying that wrong, they used those nuts they would make like hickory milk out of it. Hernando also mentioned the valuable wood, and that was a lot of things that these explorers came across. Is like, wow, this stuff has these amazing nuts. If you look right here, the tree, so it has these valuable nuts that a lot of the Native Americans would use as a milk, but they also taste good. And I will say hickory nuts are delicious. If you haven't had them, you need to try them. Shagbark hickory nuts. I finally got a nutcracker. For the longest time, I'd be using a rock on top of another rock, but then you kind of destroy the whole nut itself and then just pick in little pieces and try not to eat shell. But I will say hickory nuts taste very good. And so a lot of these early explorers found that out. Like, these trees are amazing. It has a really cool bark. It has a very good hickory nut. It makes good hickory milk, and the wood's very valuable. In 1792, an American naturalist, William Bartram, he wrote very similar things as the other explorers did. He wrote about Native Americans making hickory milk from the nuts. This was in Augusta, Georgia, but he also wrote about its distinct grooves in the bark. He noted that it was very cool bark. He didn't say cool, but he noticed that the bark was very distinct with deep grooves, and that's exactly what we have here. So you can probably tell it's much louder now. In the morning, it was very quiet. You could hear the squirrels eating. Oftentimes when we're over here with the goats, we're getting rained on from the squirrels eating hickory nuts up in the trees. And you can see all the little tiny pieces that are falling. So there's that. You could hear squirrels, you could hear birds. You can still hear birds. But now you can hear 2 other explorers, Ty and Thea, my kids, out here exploring, as always. And you might hear the goats in the background. There she is. Hello. And then the goats making their appearance. So we've talked a little bit about the background, where you might find this tree, and a little bit about its names, because that's really important. That's why the Latin name's so important, because different places have different names for things, right? With the common names. So we talked about all of those things. Now let's dive into how to identify it. We know where this might grow. We know a little bit about the bark, but we haven't really talked anything about the leaves, the buds, the fruit, all of that. So let's get into that right now on how you can identify this tree. So when identifying trees, especially by leaves, there's 3 things to look for. And I actually learned this from, I don't remember the university, but there was a university extension that did a video on this. And I'd watched it a while ago and really helped me learn a lot and helped me take my tree identification to the next level. I wish I knew who it was, but I'm sure you can find it. And so there was a video on here. They broke down the 3 things to know when looking to identify trees by leaves. The first being the leaf type, if it's simple, if it's compound. So that's the first thing to work on. And maybe I'll do a separate video on this all, right? A little more in depth. They had a short video on it. It was great though. Even just look that up, it's probably better. I can probably put that up above here. So leaf type, is it simple, is it compound? The next thing was the size and shape. You know, is it like a heart shaped? Is it really small? Is it really big? And the last thing is the leaf margins, which the leaf margin is the edge of the leaf right here. This is the margin around the leaf, okay? Those are three things you need to learn, not necessarily to identify a hickory tree, right? They help though when you want to start learning about other trees and how to identify them. So those are three things to look for in leaves and to learn. But now we'll talk about how to identify shagbark hickory by its leaf. So the first thing you need to know is that this is a leaf. The 5 of these, this whole thing is considered a leaf. Each of these is considered a leaflet. So when we look at the stem here, we can see that it is alternate leaved, meaning, here and here and here. The way these leaves come off of this central stem tells us it's alternate. If it was opposite, they would both come off of the same point. So it's alternately leaved. And again, that's because these are considered a leaf. 1 leaf, 2 leaf, 3, the start of another, okay? With 5 leaflets. So leaves, again, would be this, right? This 1 leaf. On a shagbark hickory are typically 8 to 14 inches long, with 5 leaflets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's very common on shagbark hickory. And as we look around at this example here, everywhere we see there are 5 leaflets everywhere, okay? Even these small new ones, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? So everywhere we look, we are seeing 5 leaflets. And again, the leaves are about 8 to 14 inches long. In some rare cases, there will be 7 leaflets. I don't think I've ever come across that, but it can happen. It's just more common to be 5. So that's one thing you're gonna look for when identifying shagbark hickory, are how many leaflets there are. And the leaves, I said, are about 8 to 14 inches long. The leaflets are about 4 to 6 inches long. These are the leaflets, right? So this leaflet is definitely within that 4 to 6 inch range. One thing to note, if you are in a closed canopy forest, those measurements are not always accurate. And what I mean by that, this, for example, this is a great example. These leaflets are far bigger than 4 to 6 inches. Far bigger. These are huge. This is bigger than my whole head. Okay, so you think, well, that's not 4 to 6 inches. How accurate is that, or why is that? Well, the reason is, on these lower branches, on this tree that I'm under, they get very little sun. And so in circumstances where these trees get less sun, where they're in a lot more shade, they're gonna grow bigger leaflets. They're gonna grow bigger leaflets, and that is to try and get more sun, right? So it puts a lot of energy into these leaflets here to try and gather more energy from the sun. And whereas higher up in the tree, the leaflets are much smaller. And then you'll have some shagbark hickories, which there's some around here, where it receives a lot of sunlight, and those leaflets are 4 to 6 inches in size. There's a beautiful shagbark hickory at my parents', and it really gets, it gets full sun. In this little pipe here, there was a bunch of chipmunks. Startled me. But anyways, shagbark hickory that gets full sun will follow those rules of 4 to 6 inches. And then you just saw there, like even this one, this is another example where they are far bigger, okay? So take that as it is and keep that in mind, that 4 to 6 inches isn't always the case. So if you find a hickory, a shagbark hickory, that everything else lines up. You're like, but the leaves are huge. Look around. If it's in a shady environment, that's probably why. So shagbark hickory leaves are going to be broadest at the middle. They're going to have a serrate margin. You see this part right here, these little teeth. So you can see the edges there are serrated. So a serrate margin. And I can't capture on the camera here, but one thing that is unique to hickories is they have tiny tufts of hair on these margins. Very tiny, but they are there. So the terminal leaflet will always be the biggest, which is going to be the one here at the end. Okay, on each leaf, the terminal leaflet will be the biggest. You can see right here. Another thing is the petiole, the leaf stalk, is going to be more stout. Whereas on a pignut hickory, so a pignut hickory has a lot of similarities to a shagbark hickory. They're very similar in appearance, other than the bark when they're mature. When they're young, that's not the case. So a pignut hickory leaf stalk is going to be more thin, more slender. On a shagbark hickory, it's going to be more stout. So that's another thing you can look for. Also, the underside of the leaf will be more pale and it's fuzzy. So if you feel that, it's fuzzy on them, okay? And you can see the buds are brown. They're blunt on the end. And they're about 1/2 inch to 1 inch in size. And they're more elongate on a shagbark hickory than they are on a mockernut hickory. So now we're going to talk about the bark. This is a very mature shagbark hickory tree that really lives up to its name. And we'll look at another one right here, not as big. But you can see this one is a really good example of that gray armor-like bark that grows in long vertical strips. And it peels, almost peels, off of the tree. Outwards, I guess you could say, towards the top of the piece of the bark. The tops and the bottoms kind of peel outwards, and you could just pull them right off in strips like that. You can kind of see an example right here, the way it makes this U-shaped. Here's a little better. You can see how these peel off like that, giving it that shaggy look. Really, the whole way up the tree, you can see the bark, how it kind of hangs off in those tough looking strips, right? I've heard that, I don't remember the kind of bat, but some bats even nest in these, on some of these trees. Small bats, of course, but some of them do nest in those bark, in those peeling, shaggy bark strips, is what I'm trying to say. So on a mature tree, as this shagbark hickory, and really all around here are some nice mature ones, the bark's all pretty similar. Some a little more shaggy than others, but it all is shaggy. On the younger trees, that's not the case. The younger trees are harder to identify, and that's where those leaf identification, buds, the leaf stalk, all of that becomes very important, because a young pignut hickory and a young shagbark hickory have very similar bark. But let's take a look at what a young shagbark hickory bark looks like. Okay, here we have an example of a younger shagbark hickory. You can see the stripes in the bark, but you can see it's not shaggy, it's smooth. So this is what the younger bark looks like. Here is a young shagbark hickory. You can see it's light gray, smooth. It'll have these stripes in it, as this does. And sometimes you'll get like X's in it, but that's it. So this really isn't nearly as distinct as it would be on a more mature shagbark hickory tree. Now, let's talk about the fruit. As you can see, the nuts of this tree, and it is loaded. And they are loaded every year. So let's take a look at some. Here's one. We'll go over here to the side by side. Here we have different parts of the hickory nut. They're normally about like 1 3/4 inches big, smooth, green color. before it reaches maturity. As it matures, it's going to turn more brown to black colored. It'll have these 4 ribbed husks right here, and here's some that are broken up here to show you what they look like. To me, it reminds me of like a clementine. I believe clementines are in 4 sections that you kind of just break apart. Might be a little more, but you know what I mean. So it's similar to that, right? Almost kind of the same size too. So the husk will split all the way. On the inside here is the husk. Very light colored on the inside, but it's also not fully matured, so that color will change. And then the fruit, right here is the nut, okay? So it's like a white colored nut, white, lighter colored. And it can vary in size and shape, but it does have that egg shape that we talked about earlier. Hence the name ovata, coming from a Latin word meaning egg-shaped. And it's going to have like this little fine point here at the end of these fruits here. Almost kind of like an acorn, right? So as they dry out, they will split at maturity. And see, here's some examples of that, okay? And then this is what it looks like before that, seed, before that nut is, while it's still inside of the husk. And this one, you can tell compared to this one, was not fully mature, much smaller. And so this one is loaded. Not a great angle from here, but they're loaded, and they do not produce fruit until about 40 years old. So, these are older than 40 years. So now I want to talk about the rooting and growth habits of these trees. I love to grow trees. I grow a lot of trees in the little backyard nursery I have. And if you've ever shopped around for trees, you might not see many shagbark hickories. Maybe you will. The reason for that is the very deep taproot it has. In its first 2 years, that taproot can be 2 to 3 feet deep. Most of its growth goes underground first, like a lot of the nut-producing trees, oaks and things like that. Will produce a deep taproot, but that makes it hard to grow in a nursery setting. So keep that in mind. If you want to grow one of these and just throw it in a pot, it's not going to be happy in a small pot. It wants that deep taproot. They are a long-lived species. It's a wind-firm tree, so it's very strong with winds, and it can tolerate intermediate shade. As you can see here, I showed you some of those giant leaves, right? It's just reaching for sun, doing all it can to get some sun, but it's thriving still. It's a healthy tree. It's still nut producing, so it can tolerate some shade. They grow in a closed canopy forest. It's not ideal, right? It's going to need some sun. In this area, you can tell, most of these leaves you can see right now have sun on them. So I want to show you a few of the hickories here. There's one there, here, there, there. This big one right here, here, there, and there's the small one, another small one, and there's a few more that way. And then we have some up in the woods as well. But anyways, let's take a look at these. This is actually the perfect angle, and I didn't even plan on it. They have a very long, tall trunk with not a whole lot of lateral growth, as you can tell. They're very straight and long with a very upright canopy. Really, the exception to that would be this one here that I don't know what happened, why it grew that way, but all the others around here grow very straight and upward, whereas this one split off and made, to me, the most beautiful canopy. And that long, narrow crown, that canopy, it's consistent no matter where it grows. So I didn't really mention that, but it is consistent whether in a closed canopy forest. In the woods, we have them that grow just like that. Or at my parents' house, for example, there's one shagbark hickory in their yard, and it grows just like these. The other thing I forgot to note is the lower branches droop. And I am guessing that is because of the weight of the fruit. but it's a very common thing. You can see in all of these lower branches, they tend to droop, similar to like a walnut tree, but I know that's definitely because of the fruit. So shagbark hickory trees have a lot of special uses. The first thing that comes to mind, I would think, is the nuts. Very valuable to a lot of wildlife, not just squirrels and chipmunks, although they do make up 5 to 10% of a chipmunk's diet. But black bear, fox, rabbit, mice, mallards, wood ducks, bobwhite quail, and turkey have all been known to feed on the nuts from a shagbark hickory, or hickories in general. There are over 212 species of moth and butterfly that depend on the shagbark hickory, using it as a host plant. One of them being the eastern tiger swallowtail that we have here. Another one I haven't seen in maybe 10 years is the hickory horned devil. The caterpillar and the moth it becomes are just amazing. You really need to look that up. I don't have any pictures of it. Again, here's the eastern tiger swallowtail. And this next one is incredible. This is the Luna moth. I took this picture in 2019. This feeds on the shagbark hickory. How amazing is that? Another thing that a lot of people might be turned off by or might love is deer don't really prefer hickory nuts. They don't really bother them. There's probably gonna be someone in the comments saying, I've seen deer eat them. And that's because deer, the way they browse, they really try a little bit of everything. But this is not like acorns are to deer, right? So deer are not seeking out hickory nuts. So that might be a good thing for you, might be a bad thing. Just something to keep in mind. They can tolerate a decent amount of shade. That's a nice thing. Now let's talk about the wood. The wood is very valuable, and we haven't really worked with hickory wood a whole lot, even though we have it, but let's talk about it. The wood is great for firewood, and you know, over at Outdoors with the Morgans, firewood's a big part of what we do. It burns very hot. It's a hot burning wood, and it's a very even, long burning wood, which is great. Very comparable to like oak. Okay, so hickory, one of the best firewoods in our area. Really hot fire. The other thing is for cooking and smoking. You know, you always hear like hickory smoked, whatever, right? So I've never done that, but people love hickory wood for smoking and, you know, different flavor when cooking. The last thing is the valuable wood is used for a lot of different hand tools. Makes very strong, tough handles. One thing that is unique to hickory that does not compare to other trees is it has the strength, which a lot of trees have that. It's tough and its stiffness, okay? So it has the toughness, the stiffness, and the strength, okay? It has all three of them, which that's unique to them because not everything has those three features, whereas hickory does. So that makes it great for all of those things I listed, like baseball bats, gymnastic equipment, ladder rungs, tool handles, furniture. So it is used commercially for that. Some things to keep in mind if you're gonna be planting this. It's a beautiful tree, makes a lot of nice shade, great fruit, animals love it, but do not plant this somewhere where your cars would be parked under it. Or maybe like, you know, if you had maybe like your swing set or something like that, somewhere where you hang out, like a picnic table. You don't want any of that under there. And the reason I say that is they are heavy. I don't know how I haven't been hit yet, because I spend a lot of time under these trees. They are heavy when they come, especially from a tall canopy. When those things are falling, they're loud. And every time I'm out collecting seeds or whatever, I hear them falling around me. I am thinking, I don't want to get hit in the head. The other thing, sometimes we'll have the truck over here, and I don't like keeping the truck here long. I'll pull it into the goat area. That way it's not going to get hit where there's no trees in the middle. Because these would definitely dent a car, I believe. I'm pretty sure it would. When they fall, they have a lot of power. So that's something to keep in mind if you're planting these. Other than that, a great tree to have in your yard, I think. If you're in that native range, definitely plant it. If you want to grow it yourself, collect the seeds. Seeds start falling in about August through October. I would say September is kind of the best time. where they're most mature. October, by then it gets harder. You're competing against, animals who work 24/7. They do require a stratification, cold moist stratification, CMS, cold moist stratification. So you could just put that in, like I'd soak mine, I'd put mine in a Ziploc bag with holes in it with peat moss that is moist and keep it in the fridge over winter. Other things you do is just plant it, but you got to protect it, right? So you could just plant it in the fall, have like hardware cloth over it, and that way it's going through what it naturally does, right? They go through a cold winter. When I do it in the fridge, it's just in a controlled environment, but I'm recreating those same things, right? It's moist, it's cold in the winter. You just recreate that to break its dormancy, so the seed will then germinate and grow a tree. So growing from seeds, great. I prefer to do that, but remember that deep taproot. So don't put it in a little pot because it's not going to do well. Those taproots need to grow. There's deep tree pots that would be great for 1 year. After that, get it in the ground, or just direct sow it. Plant it in its final destination and protect it. And one thing I wanted to say is my goal in this is obviously to teach you about the shagbark hickory, but I wanted to put together a longer video on it. And the reason is there aren't many of those out there. When I, about 4 or 5 years ago, I started really getting into trees and plants. And the first thing I want to do is find YouTube videos on these things. And there's a lot of short videos, some great ones, especially from like university extensions. So I found a lot of those, but a lot of them are like 4 or 5 minutes. I hope, and my goal in this is to put together, whether it's a 25-minute video that covers all of that, right? The identification, it's, what the tree's used for, how it grows, where it grows, a number of different things, everything I covered today. So that's really kind of my goal in this, is to put a video out there on all of these plants and have as a great resource to learn about these. You can always read too, and that's how I find all of this stuff out, is by reading. But videos help a lot too. And I never really found many videos, if any at all, that kind of checked all the boxes I was looking for. So that's my intention. That's my goal, is that I can create a bunch of these videos that kind of check all of the boxes on things you would want to know about one specific species. They're going to be longer and focused on just one species, but I think it'll be a great resource that I hope I can build over time. So that's the goal here. Let's see how it goes. Thank you. Okay, well, I think that wraps up this video. I have really been looking forward to making this. I did a lot of research, and a lot of it I knew, a lot of it I didn't know. So it's been a blast to put this together. I really enjoy these videos. I don't know how long this will be. It might be really long. I apologize. But I hope you learned something. Please let me know if you did. And go out and find some shagbark hickory. Try the nuts if you haven't. Very good tasting. They're delicious. But anyways, I hope you learned something. I enjoy making these. I'm going to make a lot more of them. There are so many different species of plants that I want to cover. Not just trees. You have sedges, you have grasses, flowering plants, wetland areas. A lot of things I want to dive into. I enjoy making these. I hope you like it. Please leave a comment below. Let me know if you enjoyed this. Give me some feedback. There's a lot of information. I don't know how well it's going to flow together. I'm going to work on it. I'll get better at it. Maybe it wasn't that great, but I will improve. I think I put a lot of information in here. I don't know how the delivery was on all of it, but the camera part, I think, is the hardest part for me, to point out different things. You only have so many hands. So those are my closing thoughts. I loved it. I love the shagbark hickory tree, and I hope you do too now after this video. And I hope you can find some if you haven't. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned because there's going to be a lot more of these videos coming up.